Alright folks, how are we doing? It's Shabbash here to talk about the lovely little purple bar under your health and mana, and that is Ward. Ward is reset for every battle, and Ward is basically acting like effective HP. So when it is activated in battle, it can absorb a portion of incoming damage to your ward before that damage affects your HP. And Ward becomes more important later on in the game, or when you're doing difficult content where your stats aren't high enough to negate incoming damage and you really need to increase your effective health pool, and Ward is the best way to do so. Now there's a simple formula that is used to calculate your character's ward, and it's given as the sum of your HP and mana divided by 2, or halved if you like, and then this is multiplied by any additional ward increasing item source. Each item with increased ward acts as a multiplier, making it more effective if you have multiple sources of ward equipped. So let's give you an example here. I'm going to swap to a class which doesn't have any items equipped, and we can work out our ward together. So you can see if I go to my equipment, I've got nothing equipped in my world slot, and then you can check your status and that will show you your HP and mana, and I actually don't have any mana equipped, so it's these numbers on the right hand side. That is your total health and mana pool. So we've got 8,930 HP, 2,519 mana. Adding those together gives us 11,449. Divide that by 2 and we get 5,724.5, and you can see with the ward it's rounded down there. So our base ward is 5,724. So I'm going to equip an item piece with only ward on it. This Moral Certus Cuirass here, you can see it has 36% ward. So this is just going to act like a simple 1.36 multiplier to our base ward. And that should give us 7,785 ward now, and yeah, there we go. So adding another source, let's add this Mighty Griffin Shield here, 148% ward. We're going to multiply by 2.48, and that should give us 19,307 or 8 or so. And yeah, 19,304. There's a little bit of rounding going on in the background which you can't see. So yeah, each individual item which has ward on it acts as a multiplier, and it just makes it more effective. So multiple sources of ward in different equipment slots is really good. Even better if your items have HP and mana, such as the Old Northern Crown. That's what makes it so good, because it also increases your base mana. Your base ward, sorry. And yeah, it's important to note that the base ward calculation takes into account both of your HP and your mana equally, and that notably makes endgame mage builds have a bit more ward than you might have expected. Like those Omnimancers and Heretics, they've got thousands and thousands of mana, so their base ward is pretty high. And it's also why the Cataphract spec, which has a 12% base HP increase, gives a really great boost to ward as well. We just have a quick look. Cataphract, you see it has a 12% HP increase, which is a huge increase to your base ward. Now, to actually utilize your ward pool in battle, it needs to be activated and then maintained. And some classes and specs allow you to start the battle with ward activated for a limited number of turns. And ward upkeep is defined by your ward turns, which you can see within your offhand skill slot down here. You can see I've got 10 turns of ward on starting this battle as Gilgamesh. But while you have ward activated with positive ward turns and you have ward remaining, any incoming damage will go through your ward first, before then lowering your HP. So keep an eye on your ward turns down here, because if that runs out without you noticing, you might get a nasty surprise on your HP. So we use skills to increase our ward turns, and typically for longer fights or dungeons, it's best to practice to buff your ward turns up at the start, where it's safest to do so. If you've ever seen any of my endless dungeon videos, you'll see I buff up hundreds of ward turns at the beginning. So skills that increase your ward turns, we've got Fortify 1, 2, and 3. And for endgame, Fortify 3, it's a really good one down here, learned from the Tier 5 Majestic class. Gives you 7 ward turns, and it only costs 75 mana. Also, when you're buffing ward turns for the first time, it might be a little bit confusing. It will look as if you only give you 6 turns, but remember you are also taking 1 turn to cast the skill itself. And then we've got the Ward of Metal skills, like the Ward of Iron here, Ward of Steel, Ward of Mithril down here as well. These are actually all bought from the Arcanists out in the world, and really the most important ones are Ward of Mithril here at tier 6, and also Ward of Ortonite at tier 10. Generally we're not really using Ward in the early to mid game, So yeah, Ward of Mithril, you see it gives ward for 5 turns and also increases our damage absorption. Ward of Orna recovers and grants ward for 7 turns, also increases damage absorption up to 85%. And yeah, that actually moves us on nicely to ward absorption, which we can increase usually using skills. The majority of classes have a base ward absorption of 30%, meaning when ward is activated, 30% of incoming damage will go to your ward and the rest will hit your health bar. Some classes like Gilgamesh, as I showed earlier, start at 50% ward absorption, and we'll have to use skills to increase our ward absorption, and these will become a really important part of pretty much all of your skill loadouts actually. So early on, the skills which increase ward absorption are like Rampart. You see this gives 30% absorption, Rampart 2 gives 50%, but really, and again, it's going to be your Ward of Mithril from tier 6 to like tier 9, that gives us 75% ward absorption, which is really a good healthy amount. We then have Ward of Orna at tier 10, increasing damage absorption up to 85%, and we have Divine Bastion and Divine Bastion 2 learned from Atlas Vanguard and Titan Guard respectively. These increase damage absorption all the way to 100%. So fighting as Gilgamesh at tier 10, it actually starts with 50% ward and regains ward every turn, but also its ward absorption starts at 50% as well. So if we go Transference 3, so you did 12,000 damage and it took 6,000 absorbed to ward down there, so it already starts at 50% ward absorption. Moving on, he's about to use Divine Bastion, and that will give him 100% ward absorption, and also some ward recovery as well. So now if we attack him, you should see all of our damage will hit his ward bar, and we will not touch his health whatsoever. So there we go, 8,000 damage went straight to his ward, 23,000 damage straight to his ward. So yeah, this can be quite difficult to deal with if you don't have good damage. But one way to get around this, by the way, is actually to use dots, because dots affect your health bar directly and they don't go through ward. So I don't have any dots on me right now, but dots can certainly be a great way to defeat people with high ward. So as you've likely noticed, just like your HP and mana, it's actually possible to recover your ward during battle, but the only way to do so is with skills or also with class or spec passives. There's no potion that recovers ward, there's no healing ward potion available in the game. So examples of passive ward recovery, again, Cataphract, really the best ward spec in the game. You see ward is automatically activated and it also recovers each turn. And then we basically have the warrior line from tier 8 onwards. Atlas Vanguard, ward is strengthened by the Might of Giants. Ward is automatically activated in battle and recovers each turn. Titan Guard again with Shoulders of Giants 2, ward is automatically activated in battle and recovers each turn. And of course Gilgamesh, the end game ward monster, ward is automatically activated in battle and recovers each turn. So looking at some ward recovery skills then, and by the way, ward can be recovered without you having any ward activated. So typically you have Mend Wall 1, 2 and 3, recovers 10% ward here, a little bit of mana. Mend Wall 2 recovers 30% of ward but does require 2 turns in battle. And finally you have Mend Wall 3, which covers 50% wards and also requires 3 turns in battle. The Mend Walls really are actually outclassed by Divine Bastion. We'll come on to that in a second, but you also have Ward of Mithril, which recovers a little bit of ward, and Ward of Orna also recovers a little bit of ward when you use it. So then the Divine Bastions 1 and 2, learned from Atlas Vanguard and Titan Guard respectively, recover a huge amount of ward. Actually, Divine Bastion 2, that's where the main difference is. Divine Bastion 2 recovers a much greater amount of ward than Divine Bastion 1. I believe it's around 75% or 85%, somewhere around there. It's a hell of a lot. It's better than Mend Wall. 3 does cost a little bit more mana, but you also have 8 ward turns included within the skill, whereas Mend Wall 3 doesn't give you that ward turn. So really Divine Bastion and Divine Bastion 2 are the major ward recovery skills. There's also a couple of active damaging skills which grant you ward. For magic users, you have Transference 1, 2 and 3. You see Transference 2, it deals non-elemental magic damage and recovers ward. That's really nice actually for mages. Transference 2 and 3 both give you, I believe, 15% ward. The amount recovered is the same. For attack-based builds, you have Ward of Light 1 and Ward of Light 2. So while dealing holy damage, also recovers ward and a little bit of health as a percentage of damage dealt as well. Finally, pets are also a really good source of ward recovery. See, the Fayeti pet has the Ward of Mithril skill. This actually will act the exact same way as if you were using the skill yourself. Give you ward turns, ward absorption and ward recovery. To be honest, my favorite ward based pet is the Orichalcum Golem, which is a tier 7 pet. This is not an event pet at all, and you see it has a lot of ward recovery skills: Mend Wall, Ward of Iron, Ward of Steel, Ward of Mirror. These all give ward recovery as well as ward turns. So this is really the best pet for active ward regeneration. Really good for endless dungeons, normal dungeons, and also raiding for certain characters as well. Finally, on the itemization side of things, I want to talk about adornments and just effectively clear up how they are included in the ward calculations. Firstly, adding adornments into an item will increase that item's ward additively, and then again that will feed into the ward calculation as it will multiply against all the other ward items. So looking at some nice ward adornments, teardrops are really good from Mammon and also Arisen Mammon. You see it has 2% ward, so that 2% will literally just get added onto the base item. If I show you my Apollyon axe, I have Eyes of Kerberos in it, which also gives you HP and mana, which again adds to your base ward pool. And then this 2% gets added up here, which has increased my weapon to 74%. And then it's that 74% which gets multiplied with the rest of the items on top of your base ward. So yeah, Pale Eyes of Kerberos, really a great adornment. It is an event adornment coming from the event raid Kerberos. Really great for putting increased ward in your weapon. Those HP and mana also increasing your base ward, remember. Otherwise you have the teardrops from Mammon and Arisen Mammon typically giving you 2% ward. And the typical thing you'll see with adornments is that anything above superior quality will actually have 2% ward. You see the base Mammoth's teardrop has 1%, and if you find a superior Mammoth's teardrop, it will have 2%. So it will go up from that. Specifically for armor adornments, we really want to focus on Jewels of the End. This is one of the best adornments in the game. You see you have HP and mana as well as ward 1% there. So we're increasing our base ward in the calculation for HP and mana. And then if you have superior quality or above, you also get 2%, which gets added onto your item and further multiplied in the ward calculation. As a budget version for 2% ward jewels, you can actually find random jewels in jewelers or randomly in general. You see this refined code jewel has 2% ward on it. Building a few jewelers gives you better chance of finding them. And here I have a Kib jewel as well, which has 1% ward. So you can actually build up a decent amount of 2% ward jewels this way. Really good budget option instead of using Jewels of the End, which are, yeah, pretty hard to come by a lot of 2% versions. So just the final note on adornments, again, how they are affected. If we take this Arisen Searcher's Cuirass as an example, I've got 7 Jewels of the End in there, which add up to give me 81 HP and mana. Also 14% ward. So that 14% ward from the jewels is just added onto the base item, giving a total ward multiplier for the item of 49% there. So again, adding all sources of HP and mana onto your class base, add your HP and mana together, half it, that gives you your ward base, and then you multiply it by every individual ward source. So multiply by 1.74 here, multiply by 1.44 here, multiply by 2.19 here, multiply by 1.49 here, multiply by 1.3 here, and this Carl's Ring, again, really good, gives you HP and mana, increasing my base ward further. For things like shield, there's often a little bit of rounding errors again, so if you're 1% here or there, you are pretty much there. Final things to note on actually fighting against ward, there's a couple of classes and a spec in the game which deal increased damage directly to ward. So you've got the Nyx at tier 9 with the Saboteur passive. You see your attack deals extra damage to your opponent's ward. Then you also have the tier 10 version with the Realm Shifter. You've got Saboteur 2, this deals even more damage to ward. And then there is the tier 9 Assassin spec with Assassinate, which again, your attacks deal extra damage to an opponent's ward. So that portion of damage that was absorbed by your opponent's ward gets multiplied by Saboteur or Assassin if you have them. Alright folks, thanks for watching this ward guide. Really hope it helped in one way and you learned something new or had something cleared up that you were questioning yourself. As always, please feel free to comment below with any further questions you've got or hit me up on the Orna Legends Discord server and we can discuss in more detail at our convenience there. I'm Shabbash, thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video. Ciao!